Will Jameis Winston ever be a starter again? After further review, ESPN 1045, we are watching and reacting. Let's go ahead and see what this young man has to say.
Jameis Winston met with the media yesterday after practice at Saints OTAs. And Jameis's journey is just interesting. I mean, can we all agree on that? I don't.
Certainly is interesting. I think we can all agree on that. No problem. Look, never is always hard to say. You never want to guarantee something in sports or really even in life. I'm sure a lot of people would have said Geno Smith will never be a starter again. I'm sure a lot of people said Jared Goff will never be a starter again. I'm not saying Jameis can be a starter and have that kind of renaissance again, but there are always teams looking for a starting quarterback in the NFL. Jameis is one of those guys where, given a few years to kind of heal, he's only a few performances away, good performances away, from someone giving him an opportunity. There are teams that are always looking for a stopgap quarterback. If Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield and players like that can find starting jobs, there's no reason to think in the future Jameis Winston won't be able to as well.
I don't think anybody...
I almost cut myself off there. With that being said, I don't think he will be a starting quarterback again, like in the same way he has been in the past, where, you know, he was a first overall pick. He was kind of a franchise quarterback. Okay, that didn't work out. Then he goes to the Saints, and a lot of people thought, well, maybe he can find some of that success. Maybe he can find that 5,000 passing yards at 30 touchdowns. Maybe he can find some of that again and be that player. I'm not sure if that will be his role moving forward, as much as it'll be like, well, we need a quarterback for a year. Jameis is available. Well, let's see what happens.
Nobody's going to dispute that. And it really got interesting once he left Tampa and came to New Orleans. And I don't think it's gone really how any of us thought it would.
No, it certainly has not. I mean, Jameis, see, I would disagree with that. I would say Jameis is the interesting part of his career was in between the 30 for 30, where he had 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions, 5,000 yards, because that's a very interesting year. That year, it's like there's so many ups and there's so many downs that you tweak a little bit, and all of a sudden it's like, man, it's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, right? So it's like that year gave people enough hope for Jameis. But then the following year, I think, destroyed a lot of that hope. When you have Sean Payton as your head coach and you average 140 yards passing per game or whatever it was, yes, his touchdown interception was fixed, but it doesn't matter if you're averaging 150 yards passing per game. And then the injuries mounted up, so then the interesting level dropped after that first 6 games with the Saints.
I mean, did anybody see the injury-riddled seasons? I remember having plenty of people in the camp that this is great. Jameis is going to have a career resurgence under Sean Payton. He's going to be great. He's going to be the franchise quarterback he could be the franchise quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. This is going to work well. And then the other people in the camp were the guy threw 30 interceptions last year. He's, reckless with the football. Yeah, everybody made jokes about him personally and things of that nature, but nobody really said, yeah, the guy's injury prone. He's going to come in and get hurt all the time. And let me be clear.
Jameis was incredibly polarizing, even as a player, because I was one of the guys in the camp saying, look, you can't turn the ball over that much coming into after Drew Brees. Because what I was saying at the time was, this is a team that's used to Drew Brees not turning the ball over at all. So you're used to the defense not being on the field as much, you're used to sustained drives, you're used to all this stuff. Then all of a sudden the team would have to deal with whatever it is, counting the fumbles, 40 to 50 extra turnovers, 40 to 50 extra possessions the defense has to deal with. It's just a lot of change, is what my problem was at the time. There certainly is upside, or was upside, with Jameis. At the time, he was, 25 years old, 24 years old. It is something to throw 5,000 yards. It is something to throw 30 touchdowns. No doubt. Now, the off-field stuff, the Jameis's leadership abilities or that abilities of being a quarterback in the room, leading a team, I can't speak to all that. I'm not in the locker room. I don't know. I've never heard anyone say anything bad about Jameis. I haven't heard anyone in the locker room come out and say, like, we don't like this guy or he's a problem. So I'm certainly not going to just randomly say that kind of stuff about him. So it's always been in between the sidelines with Jameis. It's always been what happens during the game. That has been his entire thing. So I was one of the people who was very hesitant with Jameis. No one can predict injuries. But I think at the time, I said I would rather have the 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions Jameis than the Jameis we got, which was incredibly safe, incredibly hesitant, scared to throw interceptions, scared to push the ball downfield. And I didn't think Jameis did himself any favors when he was playing for the Saints.
I'm not trying to label Jameis as injury prone. I'm just saying, that wasn't the concern. The concern was the turnovers. So seeing how this has gone adds an intrigue level to it. We all remember how it went down last year, where
it was bad.
It started out rough for a half of football. Then in the second half against the Falcons, he looked awesome. You win that game. But after that, obviously, he had injured his foot in that game. Then the broken back happens. He plays a couple games with those injuries. It doesn't.
There was a lot of questions, too, with Jameis and the coaching staff. So there was a lot of talk about, like, Dennis Allen promised Jameis something. He didn't get it. And it is difficult, or I would imagine it would be difficult, to go from Bruce Arians to Sean Payton to Dennis Allen while dealing with injury. So, I mean, I certainly understand that part of it. I certainly understand where Jameis would struggle at that of the beginning of the year, going from Payton's system to Allen's system. I mean, no one's going to sit here and say that I'm Dennis Allen or Pete Carmichael's biggest fan. And it certainly is a drop from Sean Payton. So we can admit, yes, Jameis was bad at the beginning of last year, and then he got hurt. But in the grand scheme of things, like, what does that really mean? Not much. Not much.
Obviously, it doesn't go well because the man's got a broken back. He's trying to play quarterback. You bench him. You go with Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton, not good.
Dalton was fine. I said that every year last year, and I will say it until the day I die. Andy Dalton was fine last year. Wasn't good. Wasn't bad. Just managed the offense. At certain points, the offense was kind of clicking. At certain points, things looked okay. I think Dalton, all things considered, I think Dalton was pretty decent last year.
But they stick with Jameis Winston. And Jameis very publicly voiced displeasure for that. And at that point, everyone assumed, all right, he's out of here. Like, he's leaving.
I assumed that for sure.
This staff isn't the one that had the vision for him like Sean Payton did. And they've made that clear by when he says he's healthy, he's dressing out for games, they're not putting him in there. And then, to many surprise, Jameis, after the Saints signed Derek Carr, reworks his deal, takes a pay cut, and stays with the New Orleans.
This was surprising because it was obvious the coaching staff does not have any plans of Jameis Winston being the starter when he was here. Like when he was possibly the starter with Andy Dalton. That was not the case. So when they bring in Derek Carr, that is obviously Jameis Winston is not anywhere near the starting quarterback conversation. So it was surprising to me that he would say, you know what, okay, I'll stick around. I'll be the backup. That is surprising. The only reason that I can assume he did that is because he's not healthy. And he's not going to go somewhere else and be a starter. He's not going to do all that stuff. So he probably said, you know what, I'll just rework my deal. I'll get healthy. I don't have to worry about playing. I don't have to worry about the weekly grind of like getting hit and all that stuff. I can take a season, get healthy, learn, get back to where I'm at, and then next year, if I want to, I can go try and find a spot to be a starter. That's what I would assume is going through Jameis's mind when he signs the deal and restructures. And it makes sense. He was dealing with some serious injuries last year. Serious injuries. So taking a year at his age, getting back, getting strong, working out, seeing things, kind of learning, developing, all of that makes sense.
Saints for the final year of his contract. And I'll be honest, I'm still surprised by that move. And I'm even more surprised by it still hearing what Jameis Winston said yesterday when talking about his future with the Saints and his role, talking about how he still views himself as a starting quarterback in the NFL. That's still the goal. But accompanied with that, just how much he's embraced his current role with the team as the backup. How much.
I don't think that's surprising at all. Of course you're going to say that. I'm sure every player in the NFL, or every quarterback in the NFL says, yeah, I'm starting quality, even if they aren't starting. No one's going to say like, I'm kind of a backup. Yeah, I'm kind of just a backup guy. Everyone wants to be the guy. Everyone wants to be a starter. And I'm sure Jameis is thinking exactly what I said. And for Jameis, he's probably thinking, all right, if I can parlay a couple good preseason situations, a couple good, end of the game situations, I parlay one or two good performances into a big time contract with a team next year. All right, whatever. That 100% can happen. Would y'all be surprised at all if Jameis Winston played good in the preseason or whatever, and next year he's a starting quarterback for Green Bay? I wouldn't be surprised. Or if he's a starting quarterback for Tampa again, I wouldn't be surprised. Would not shock me whatsoever. So I understand where he's coming from saying he's a starter while he's obviously not.
He's still bought into the Saints franchise, to all of that, through the regime change, through everything that happened last year. He's still all in with the New Orleans Saints. And Jameis Winston yesterday had this to say about his role as the backup to Derek Carr.
Join us for Restaurant.
These ads, man. These ads they come out of nowhere. It's unbelievable.
His availability in the past 3 years or so, I've been banged up, so the leadership, they have to continue to move forward. And I just know when I first got here into this organization that we were going to have, some of the top players, we're going to have some of the best coaches. So in terms of trusting this organization, I just know this organization, especially during the Sean Payton era, has been very successful. And Dennis has basically carried that over because he is built to be a successful head coach. So
no, he is not. He's never even been over 500 as a head coach. He's never been successful as a head coach.
For me, my accountability is just focusing on my health and being ready when that opportunity presents itself.
Well, that sounds exactly like what I was talking about. It sounds like and you also got to think too, like you might as well just remain in the same space where you're trying to be healthy, you're trying to do all that stuff. Like if you're Jameis and you're banged up, why would you even want to go somewhere else and be the backup? You might as well just say, all right, fine, I'll stay in New Orleans, I'll be the backup, I'll work here, I'll do all this. Like, it's okay. The more you kind of lay it out there, the more it makes sense that he would restructure if he's not going to go try and be a starter. I assumed that he was going to leave because he wanted to go be a starter. I didn't even factor into it until he restructured that, he's probably just wants to heal up. He probably wants to get himself back to where he feels like his highest level, and then he can make that jump to go find another team or to try out for another team or to parlay whatever into a new contract and a new gig.
It's just strange for him to say in one breath, I'm still a starting quarterback. And again, look, I expect him to say that. We all expect him to say that, right? He's a competitor.
Well, then what's surprising?
If he didn't say that, that'd be a little bit more concerning.
What are we talking about
But
here?
Why not go look for your opportunity if that were the case? It just adds another level of intrigue to him restructuring the deal, taking the pay cut and saying, sure, I'll be the backup, knowing that opportunity. I mean, the end of that cut right there, focus on my health, wait for the opportunity when it comes, and be ready. There's no guarantee that the opportunity comes in New Orleans.
It's much more. It's not going to be in New Orleans. Man, guys, are y'all in the same boat I am? The answer is right there. The answer is on the table. Like, he's not trying to be the starter in New Orleans. He's trying to focus on his health for the next opportunity to be the starter somewhere else. He's going to get healthy. He's going to hang out for a second. And then when the next opportunity is available to go be a starter, he's going to go do that. And it's a better opportunity if he tries to do that when he's fully healthy than right now. Because as we've seen in the last couple of years, trying to play through injury ain't really his thing.
Orleans. And I would argue if you're Jameis Winston, you're in a worse position going into the open market after this year sitting on the bench as the backup all season than you would have been at least with the 10 games you had played for the Saints. The market for him is not going to be massive anyway, but there's no guarantee he gets on the field this year. Now, that's the one half of this. The other half of this is how much I admire Jameis Winston for doing this and how happy I am that he's on the Saints. And I think it's very good for their team. You think back the last few years with the Saints in the quarterback position, there's been a lot of injuries at that spot.
I don't think it matters at all for the Saints. Like, the difference between him and Jake Hayner or whatever is irrelevant to me. Like him, I don't put any weight or stock into, it being good for the locker room or good for him or good for the roster or good for this. If Derek Carr gets injured, we're cooked. Like, if Derek Carr gets injured, we are in a bad space. So it's one of those things where you can't even say like, oh, if Derek Carr gets injured, Saints have had some injury problems at quarterback, so not a problem you want to talk about, because if that happens, it's over. You might as well just fast forward to next season.
Whether it was Drew Brees and then Teddy Bridgewater filling in, whether it was Drew Brees again and then Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston filling in, whether it was Trevor Siemian or filling in for Jameis Winston, or last year Andy Dalton filling in for Jameis Winston. What the Saints have done, they've always made sure they've had a capable backup. And Jameis Winston is absolutely a capable backup that has been in this system now for 3 years, has a good understanding of it. And if something does happen to Derek Carr, I feel very comfortable having Jameis Winston go in and lead this Saints team. That part of it is great. I'm ecstatic about that. Like, I'm happy that Jameis Winston decided not to leave this offseason and took the restructured deal and is that bought in for that reason. I think he's more than capable if that opportunity presents himself. I'm just still baffled that there's no guarantee that that opportunity presents itself, and he's still so bought in, especially with the way things were perceived to have gone down last year. But that's where he is. And
I think there's a better market. Like he said, there's no market next year versus last year or whatever. If Jameis gets healthy and Jameis has good preseason performances and Jameis has good workouts and all that stuff, I think the market next year for him, a year removed from all the injuries and all of that, I think that builds up the market. That builds up the intrigue. That builds up, maybe he still got it, versus coming off of all of that immediately. Like, I can't imagine anyone offering him a starting role after last year, especially if he's not fully healthy, which you would know if you're going through physicals and all that stuff. So I think there'll be way better of a market after this year than this past offseason.
And he seems very content. That's been another thing about Jameis ever since he's gotten here, man. He has always been positive about everything surrounding him and his tenure with the New Orleans Saints. And that's huge for the culture. He's a great leader. And this is an organization that values culture. And if the opportunity does present itself for him to take the reins this year, because there is something that happens with Derek Carr, he's more than capable of doing it. And I have the faith in him to do that. More than I would another backup that the Saints would have been left with had he went and sought the open market.
I mean, it's like, pretend that Jameis is off the team and Trevor Siemian's the backup. If Derek Carr gets hurt, it's like, yeah, I have full faith that Trevor Siemian could finish games. He could go out there and, exist. Would I have full faith that he could be really good? No. Do I have full faith that Jameis Winston could come in this year and be really good? No. Just because, the system and all that stuff, I think backup quarterback is a very overvalued thing by the fans. You always hear people say, you want a really good backup. Say, do you? Do you want a backup? You want someone who can finish games and play. You don't want someone who literally cannot play. But I think there's way too much value put into your backups. That's just how I've always looked at it. Because my thought is, the NFL is such a quarterback-driven league. Like, if you have to go to your backup, unless you're dealing with a young backup who's got like a crazy high ceiling, like when Alex Smith passed the torch to Patrick Mahomes, unless you're in that situation, like, it's too much of a transition. It's too much of a shift for the backup to really, really matter. And I understand that backups can come in and be good and have like that spark. I totally get that. But it's kind of like with Dallas last year when Dak got hurt and Cooper Rush or whoever came in and won like 4 games, and people are talking about, like, do you turn the franchise over to Cooper Rush? Say absolutely not. Just because someone operates in a small vacuum well doesn't mean that they can do it for an extended period of time. Like the Matt Flynn stuff, Chase Daniels, like all these guys who are considered good backups and viable backups, and it's just never worked out.
We'll see how it goes. It's just a very interesting journey. It's a very interesting story. Jameis Winston and his time in New Orleans, and hearing him speak yesterday, to me, added a little bit more intrigue.
This guy's shoulders are getting a workout. Like, I've never seen someone kind of give the shrug shoulders after every sentence. But Jameis is he is an interesting career for sure, especially because, I mean, he's so wild because he peaked so early. He peaked his freshman year at Florida State, and his later years at Florida State were nowhere near as good, and he seems to always be in a meme. Like, he always seems to be in the middle of a joke, or he always seems to. He's just one of those guys where it's like he has had success, but the success is always seemed to be intertwined with like a joke or a failure or whatever, and you can't seem to escape that. And I would love for in a few years, or if he had a renaissance and he had that kind of Geno Smith moment where he goes somewhere else and has a good year, and we can, but I don't know. I mean, sometimes it doesn't work like that. Sometimes in the NFL you don't get your storybook ending. And well, Jameis, it's still early. It's still early to tell. He's still young. He still certainly could. I mean, you never write a guy off, and especially a guy who has shown flashes in the past. You wonder if it's just a change of scenery, the right coach, the right, he may mature as a player and a person, and that may change things. You never know. So, but let me know in the comments below what you think, guys. Will Jameis Winston ever be a starter again in the NFL? If so, what would the situation be that would be best for Jameis Winston? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time.